Welcome to Bamboo Wealth. Financial planning does matter. Today we're going to be continuing on the topic of estate planning. Last episode we looked at the general estate planning. Today we're going to be talking again with Wesley, and this time in relation to dying without a will. So this is a very important topic because there are some consequences if you die without leaving clear instructions what will happen to your assets and liabilities. So we'll go through different aspects and reasons why you should actually draw a will and the risks of actually dying without a will. So once again, thank you for being with us. And just a reminder, this is general advice only. If you need more specific advice, we recommend that you seek legal advice. You can come and see us. We deal with estate planning in the context that we identify potential issues, but of course, only a legal practitioner can write up and make any changes to legal documents. So Wesley, thanks again for being here today, and I'll get Wesley to ask me some questions, and we'll discuss some of the aspects of the risks and the benefits of writing a will and also not having a will. Wesley?
Awesome. Okay then. Well, just to start off with, I guess people would want to know, what is intestacy?
Intestacy, yep. Intestacy is generally when you die without a will. So we always recommend that you do seek legal advice, write up a will. It's very important, particularly today in the digital age. So intestacy is generally someone who dies without having clear instructions what will happen to their assets.
Okay, and given the fact that about 50% or so of Australians don't actually die without a will, what is the reason why it's important to avoid intestacy?
The important thing here is more about disputes. Okay, so it's very critical that you leave clear instructions what will happen to your assets. For example, who will get your assets, to what proportions each beneficiary will receive your assets, and in essence, it's avoiding litigation, challenges to your will, and also making sure the person who distributes your will is someone that you actually can trust and will do the right thing. So nominating a family member or beneficiary or even a legal practitioner to carry out your instructions is very important. So it's all about clarity, certainty, and avoiding costs and delays in processing your estate to your beneficiaries.
If I or anybody else dies without a will, who decides how my assets are distributed?
Okay, so this is where the risk lies, and that is the government has a formula. The government will actually nominate what they call an administrator, and you'll have to obtain a letter of administration which the government authority or representative will actually undertake, and this process can take a while, getting all the legal requirements, identifying the beneficiaries, arranging death certificate. The administrator will actually take time to process this. So the administrator generally will distribute your assets according to a government formula. The government formula is based on what we call a next of kin. So it's your lineal family member will receive your assets. So it starts off generally with your spouse. When you die, your spouse gets the assets, or it could be de facto, or in some cases it actually can be a previous spouse or previous children from previous relationship. So this is where the risk actually lies. So essentially, dying without a will can create a lot of delays and uncertainties, but we use the government next of kin. So if they don't find the next of kin, as we mentioned before, it starts with your spouse, then it goes to your parents, and it goes also, before that goes to your children, grandchildren, stepchildren, goes to your parents. So there is a formula that the government uses. Then it goes to your aunts and uncles, then it goes to your cousins, and last but not least, the government, which is the Crown. So if there's no one left to identify, to pass on the assets, the administrator will actually, the government will keep the remaining funds.
Wow, that does sound very complex.
Yep.
So we see like a lot of Australians are moving interstate, whether for work or family or another reason. Does it matter what state we live in relation to this?
Well, yes, that's a very good question. It does matter because different states have different laws when it comes to wills, and also when it comes to administration of wills. In the case of intestacy, dying without a will, different states have different formulas that they apply to who gets your assets if you die without a will. So some states generally will give the spouse a certain proportion, and the remaining portion it goes to the children. So For example, I think Western Australia, the number there is low. It's I think about $50,000. The wife gets the spouse gets $50,000, and their chattels, which is the items in their house, and then gets 1/3 of the remaining assets, and the other children, if there are children, will receive 2/3. So the formula can vary between how much the spouse gets and also how much the children get. Some states, the children get a half of the remaining assets. Most states children get 2/3 of the remaining assets. In some states, essentially, the spouse gets a high amount initially. So yes, it does matter. We don't choose where we die, but if you die in certain states, then there are implications, and you need to understand, how much will go to the remaining spouse versus the children. So it's very important. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've been speaking quite a bit about what happens if you don't have a will in relation to intestacy. Does this mean that intestacy is not relevant to anybody that does have a will?
Look, it is still relevant. Obviously, someone who has a will has certainty in what assets are passed, but sometimes wills can be not written correctly. So if a will has been drafted incorrectly, this happens in circumstances where the will wasn't properly signed properly or wasn't witnessed correctly. The will can be made invalid. So this is a risk why sometimes you don't necessarily have to have not made a will, but if you made a will that's not valid, it can actually trigger intestacy. Each state's different, but generally that's the risk. So the other important thing too is that even if you do have a will, you do have personal circumstances that that would have experienced. So if you've got a business, you've got inheritance, you've got more money. So writing another will is very important. That way, you know in certainty what assets will go to your nominated beneficiary. So there is a risk there.
Okay, excellent. So if somebody has a simple situation and they're happy with the current rules of intestacy, is there benefits of actually still doing a will?
If there's benefits of doing a will, yes. Look, there is major benefits of doing a will in a sense where your nominations and your bequest that you want to pass on to the next generation is very important. So essentially, sometimes some assets are passed on to some beneficiaries. If they predecease you, they die before you die, then this is what we refer to as residual assets. So we need to ensure that any residual assets are passed on to the next beneficiary, so that avoids any uncertainty. So there are many circumstances depending on your situation. So if you run a business, for example, or you're single, if you've got complex financial arrangements, if you've got a lot of assets, so it's really critical that you do ensure that the will is written.
Excellent. Okay. And just for my last question, since we see a lot of if we actually create a will,
yeah.
who can challenge that will and make a claim on that?
In an event where a will is not properly executed, written, or you don't have a will, generally people think of wills being challenged by some family member, but you might have a dependent, someone could be your friend or colleague who was dependent on you at the time of death. So if you don't have a will, they can actually make a claim under compassionate claims through different legislation. So it could also be a charity. If you don't have a will, they can actually make a claim on your estate. They can come forward, or also it could be creditors in the event of divorce. Previous beneficiaries can also make a claim. So there are various circumstances that can actually occur. So drawing up a will can alleviate any unnecessary stress on the family. It can alleviate legal costs as well. So challenges can come from pretty much any dependent, irrespective whether they were a family member or not. So it's very important to actually draw up a will in that regard.
Okay, well, that's all my questions that I have.
Okay, no worries, thanks Wesley. So just in a nutshell, the important thing here that we should be focusing on is that writing a will is very important. Dying without a will should be avoided at all costs, because it does create a lot of uncertainty, financial stress, emotional stress, and it does actually drag out the process, because you need to have an administrator appointed by the government, and you also may have administrators not looking at your interest in terms of not following your preferred bequest or beneficiaries. So it does create a lot of uncertainty in assets going to different people. So always have a will. Where possible, review your will on a 12-monthly basis, because your circumstances will change. And also bear in mind that different states have different jurisdictions around how much each beneficiary, the spouse, actually receives. So that's it from us for today, guys. Look, thanks very much for being with us once again. Please don't forget to press the like button and share this video with family and friends. Sharing is very important in the context of estate planning. As I mentioned in the previous presentations, we are entering into one of the greatest intergenerational wealth transfer of assets. And this is very critical that families understand exactly where they stand in these circumstances. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to talking to you with another topic in relation to estate planning. Have a nice day. Thank you.